All right. Welcome, Eric. Thank you so much for being here with us. And maybe before we get fully into it, you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Yeah, I guess first off, thanks for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Yeah.
And just thanks for spending some of your precious time. I really appreciate it. I'm Eric, he, him. I am a white man wearing trendy clear glasses. I have a light beard and some out of control hair. I'm based out of the Boston area. If you are ever in the Somerville, kind of Camberville area, if you know what that means, coffee's on me. By day, I am a senior accessibility designer at GitHub, where I help to make the platform more usable by assistive technology for disabled people. And in my free time, I like to write and talk about accessibility as well. It's my life's passion at this point, for better or for worse. I also really believe in making accessibility, air quotes, accessible, in that historically it has been a very difficult and fragmented discipline of web making. And so I've been trying to demystify it as much as I possibly can as I learn more about the space.
Amazing. The first thing I'd love to start with is just talking about what accessibility really means. So, since we all experience some kind of disability in our lifetime, and we really think of what is able-bodied in a pretty narrow way in the kind of ways that we make assumptions. So I'm curious, how do you think about it, and what is drawing you to this work?
Yeah. So I think my supervillain origin story is one of my first jobs. I was working for a company that subcontracted for a government service, and the content had to be accessible by letter of the law with Section 508 in the United States. And I learned about the web content accessibility guidelines. And as a designer, I was like, oh, cool. This is a cheat sheet for making good design, because good design is something everybody can use. And it snowballed from there. But to more directly answer your question, I think a lot about accessibility through the lens of the social model of disability, which is an individual's capabilities is a dance between the built environment and what they are capable of. And so that's in opposition to the medical model, where we view people who are not matching whatever the society's norm is to be something to be fixed. Once you learn about the social model of disability, you get really angry at stairs. Like, why do we build them all the time? It gets a little weird. But it's a very eye-opening way to view the world and how people in their infinite complexity and variety are able to move through it. That also extends to virtual environments.
Yeah, specifically around software and apps and things like that, what do you think are the assumptions that are getting made that maybe we could question or challenge?
A lot of them. There's so much inherent bias in how software is produced. It starts with the easiest one I can think of is, and I've been trying to push for it at work, which is just, I call it crap top day, which is like everybody's building the web on state of the art MacBooks with M whatever processors and solid state drives and basically near unlimited computational power. That may not be reflective of what people are using in the actual. And like, I think a lot of people are quick to be like, oh, we're building developer tooling for developers, so ergo it's going to be on a Mac. But you don't know. It could be a provisioned corporate environment where it's super locked down. And like, this is getting more into the performance end of things as opposed to the disability end of things. But it's like they are really interconnected, which is if it physically just can't process what you send to it, you can't use it. That also extends to how we build interfaces. So the difference between using like an appropriate underlying element and trying to fake it can give or restrict access to somebody else. And that's like a huge amount of power, and that's a huge amount of responsibility that I think most folks aren't made aware of just because of traditional comp sci education. You're usually not going to get an accessibility education, or if you do, it's touched on for 30 minutes in some course at the end of the semester.
Yeah, so I'm curious if you've seen good examples of how folks, especially in the open source and decentralized, like people who are trying to do things that are outside of just like corporate tech, maybe even projects that are smaller and don't have as many resources, how they've approached thinking about these different accessibility needs?
Yeah, I actually love the open source model for this because, bear with me here, a little story. My mom is an occupational therapist. And so growing up, this is pre open source really taking over the world. She would bring back these devices that insurance companies would give to her students. And these were like literally like $10,000 plus, like black box bespoke devices made on a one-off basis. And my dad is an electrical engineer and he would have to resolder and fix that. And that sucks. That sucks so much. Here's this one thing that you need to potentially communicate with the world. And somebody made it, threw it off the back of a truck, and it's yours now forever. And in opposition to that, the open source model allows people to find each other and create solutions that meet their needs, but also put it out into the world for other people to discover. And so a lot of contemporary assistive technology is built using the open source model. My go-to example is one of the most popular desktop laptop screen readers is called NVDA, and it was made as an answer to another screen reader called JAWS, which is beautiful, lovely, works like a dream, but is prohibitively expensive. And NVDA is free. It's all donation run. Debates about open source funding models notwithstanding, like it's built by blind people for blind people. And it has a community of blind and low vision folks who help to grow the software and evolve it and fix it and respond to emergent usability needs and all that good stuff. So like it really warms my heart to see people helping people in that way, especially not with a profit motive, just given how important it is.
Do you have suggestions for folks who are maybe building things that are not technically assistive technology, but they want to be able to have their products be usable by lots of different people, of how to get maybe into relationship with folks in the disability community, maybe even inviting contributions? Does GitHub help people? Because I think GitHub can be a little bit intimidating, but that's where a lot of developers are living and inviting contributions or issues or pull requests. How does that work in terms of trying to bring people into your project and into a relationship?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think GitHub's incredibly myopic in that way, in that as software makers making general assumptions about the audience here, like we're really into how software is made, but you got to keep in the back of your mind that for a lot of people, it's just this is the white glowing box that gets me the thing I need, and they don't care how it's made or like how it does what it does. Community outreach, I think, is really vital. It can be difficult to initially find these places, but usually a little bit of like legwork and knocking on doors can find you people. I do think genuinely people are intrinsically pretty motivated by good things and want to help. And so like I've never really seen somebody coming with humility and curiosity asking to evaluate something you're building. That said, if you are considering doing that, it also could be helpful to help them ahead of time and look into some really basic automated accessibility checkers and just kind of clip away some of the low-hanging fruit. Those will check for programmatically determinable kinds of things. So this 6 should be a 7, or this 0 should be a 1, or like this contrast ratio is a little bit wonky. And that just puts the person who's going to be evaluating your stuff in a far better position where they don't have to struggle through things that you're capable of fixing, and it allows them to more like granularly focus on what you're trying to achieve and how, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's such a good point that before we try to build or invite people in to at least have gotten as far as we can on our own with some of the ways of Googling and those kinds of things that we can do to make sure that we understand basic principles of accessibility. I'm curious, how have you seen technologists address access needs that are maybe a little less straightforward, like neurodivergence, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So jury's out, but I'm pretty sure neurodivergence. Cynically, I don't think the industry writ large really likes people like us, yet is powered by people like us. A lot of the tenets for neurodivergent friendly design are what I'd call good design, which is calm, segmented, predictable, easy to follow, obeys its own internal like consistency that doesn't sell flashy product too well. A lot of accessibility is politics. Accessibility is political. Somebody pretty prominent in the web accessibility space just says it over and over again. And the further I get in my career, it's how do you advocate successfully for these positive outcomes in an industry that is just so focused on the bottom line and achieving it by any means possible?
Yeah. This speaks to a question that was put in the chat about why don't we build for all? And that this business model, politics, etc., all seem to be threads in that question. And as folks who are trying to work outside of those dominance based approaches, I'm curious, from your perspective, what should we do? How can we shift that narrative?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm really at this point in my life hesitant to try to throw individuals that care onto the pyre of trying to enact societal change in a way that's going to lead to what I would consider a good outcome, but fighting tooth and nail to get there. To Anne's question in the chat, why don't we build for all? So if you Google search or Kagi this, a capital crawl, the only reason we have Section 508 is because disabled people organized and basically forced legislative action. And because at the end of the day, unfortunately, sometimes you do need the law to intervene for things that private entities should be doing. And so to answer your question, I would look towards those organizations that are purpose built to advocate and try to push for progressive legal practices because there's a lot of power in collective action and focused energy towards these systems that already exist and are really gunning to push things forward or keep things more realistically from regressing.
In some ways, it feels like what this space is for is to say maybe we can't change how big things work, but we can change how small things work and then try to help people find those small things and be in relationship with the people who are using and building the different things that we are doing. And Dan's question, why don't we build for all? In some ways, I don't know if that's even the right question because I'm not sure things should be built for all when they could be built for a specific context and then be in solidarity and relationship with the people who want to solve that same problem together. One of the things that may be getting in our way is this concept of people who have, as you say, like access to lots of resources and like fancy MacBooks and stuff, deciding what for all even means. But now I'm getting on my soapbox. But maybe we'll close with one. Yeah, if you build for everyone, you build for no one. That's a really interesting provocation. And a lot of people have thoughts, I think, in this group about this. So just to close this part of our section where we're recording, I'm curious if you have like maybe a hopeful vision of what could it look like if we did have technologists and people with access needs collaborating on building things.
Yeah. So I think there's Meryl K. Evans is an advocate in the space, and she pushes for a philosophy called progress over perfection. And like to your point, iterative improvement is how you get there. Perfectionism is not great. You're never going to get it right on the first try. So having that disability informed design practice or evaluation of what you've been doing is, I think, helpful if you're capable of doing that. If not, basic checks go a long way. Unfortunately, the bar is in hell. But the other kind of fun thing is if you look at the long history of technology, a lot of it is secretly disability innovations in disguise. The keyboard is directly evolved from assistive technology, subtitles, assistive technology, voice recognition, assistive technology. Glasses, we normalize them as just a thing you need. This is assistive technology. So also I just say, check out history just a little bit too, because things we may be building right now may translate into the future into the next cool thing. But by trying to address some of these access needs, we might actually build the next cool big thing. I'm rambling.
No, I think what you're saying is the exact point that I hope we all can recognize, which is that when there are these constraints that we have to accommodate, sometimes we come up with things that are actually not only useful for other people, but innovation and really rethinking things. So I think of this being not just access to people who have access needs that are related to their physical bodies, but also like economic needs or other kinds of needs that you've alluded to, where different layers of understanding technology, et cetera. And if we're working with people who are real and have real problems, we come up with things that are possibly a way to shift the whole dynamic of how we're doing things. All right. Thank you so much, Eric.